welcome back to another episode of Alter Your Health Live. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Susanna Alter.
And this is your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm sorry for Instagram listeners that we've been, this is our third attempt at it, and Facebook, I apologize that we're not on Facebook this week as it was booting us off a couple of times. So we'll figure out what was going on and hopefully be back into the live mode on Facebook and Instagram next week. But that being said, we're diving into this week's episode, which is all about the brain, the thing inside of your skull sitting atop your shoulders that maybe we take for granted in this life. And I wanted to start by saying that it is Brain Week, and Brain Week is something that my colleague, Dr. Bryant, has organized, and he has done so by connecting with all sorts of functional and naturopathic practitioners and doctors around the country, maybe the world. And I just think it's amazing how we can use technology and social media to collaborate and come together and share our knowledge and wisdom and experience on one topic so that we can really have an expanded understanding of what's going on. And I just think it's the way that the way of the future, the way that we are evolving and doing so, sharing such wisdom and valuable information. And I'm so grateful and happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. So diving into our take on brain health, since Dr. Ben and I are both total geeks about lifestyle, medicine, and nutrition, we're going to be talking just about that, but how lifestyle, medicine, and nutrition can support your brain health. And so before we dive into nutrition, I will say that a lot of our previous episodes, we talk about this way of eating as being a great way to produce longevity and health and happiness in your life. And that's because it not only supports your brain, but it supports all the organs in your body.
Right. There's not a way of eating for your heart or your brain or your kidneys or your liver. When you eat optimally, all of these organs inside of you are functioning optimally. And so that being said, there are some things to know when it comes to brain specifically that we might just focus on. And that's what the purpose of this talk is to just get you familiar with some important concepts when it comes to nourishing your precious brain.
Yes. And a lot of the research that we'll be referring to on brain health is done on conditions like Alzheimer's and autism and things like that are very prevalent in our world today and very serious conditions. However, eating this way, this kind of research is not just for those conditions, it's for overall brain health. So when we speak to these studies, you can hear it as, oh, okay, this would be something that would be in general very healthy for my brain.
Yeah, things like Alzheimer's and autism are two very common conditions associated with the brain, of course. But there are so many other things, like from stroke to brain injuries and recovering from traumatic brain injuries and that sort of thing. And a lot of these chronic diseases that, for example, heart disease, have effects or do affect the brain as well. So you can't really separate anything out.
Mm-hmm.
We got to talk about the whole picture, the whole body. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So with that long introduction, let's dive in. And let's start with the most basic of the basics, fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
So there's great research showing that greater fruit and vegetable consumption is linked with lower rates of dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons this is so is because a huge risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is actually high cholesterol and high blood pressure, and also insulin resistance, and also contaminants in the brain, metals and pollutants, things like that.
So basically, when people are eating lots of fruits and vegetables, what that really means is that they're not eating a lot of junk. So lots of fruits and vegetable consumption is associated with less amounts of processed food, animal products, and these sort of things that can be more contaminated in nature. So fruits and vegetables also have lots of phytochemicals, antioxidants that preserve the health and integrity of the vascular system, which is super duper important when it comes to all aspects of your health, the health of your vascular system or your blood vessels, but especially when it comes to your brain, because inside your brain, it's incredible, the network of blood vessels, teeny little things that wind their way into all of the cracks and crevices of your brain. If you can imagine that, there are so many blood vessels. So it's important that the blood is flowing to all of these nooks and crannies inside of your brain. And in order to ensure that is happening, we need to eat fruits and vegetables to make sure that the blood vessels maintain their strength and integrity, as well as maintain their flexibility and their ability to, because where blood flows, it's important that blood is flowing because we need oxygen, which is carried in blood, to provide, metabolize fuel in the nooks and crannies of the brain.
So a little later on, we'll talk about some specific brain foods, fruits and vegetables that are really good for the brain. But we're going to keep it general now, just speaking broadly about macronutrients that are really good for the brain. So segueing into more foods, and in general, when it comes to the best foods to eat for your brain, can anyone take a guess what they are? Instagram, our listener on Instagram. Well, the optimal foods for the brain fit into the category of complex carbohydrates. Believe it or not, there's a lot of trendy information saying that high-fat diets are optimal for brain health. And the fact of the matter is that the brain, although it makes up only 2% of your body's mass by weight, your brain weighs about 2% of your whole body, give or take. Despite that fact that it's only 2% of your body, your brain can actually use up to 50% of your body's energy. That means that 50% of the food that you eat and that goes into your mouth and you metabolize goes directly to nourish your brain. And that's a pretty astonishing figure. And given the fact that glucose or carbohydrate is the primary fuel source of the human body, human beings thrive off of glucose. Given that fact, then we need to focus on glucose or carbohydrates to nourish the brain. And like I said, the brain consumes 50% of our energy, up to that, depending on our activity. And we need to make sure that we are eating the optimal sources of glucose so that we are giving the brain food that it deserves and requires. And obviously, all carbohydrates, all glucose is not created equally. We want to focus on carbohydrates from whole food sources. So a lot of people hear the term carbohydrate and they picture a donut or a cracker or a piece of cake. And these kind of things are actually mostly fat. If you look at the ingredients of a donut, it's carbohydrate, but it's deep fried in fat. So most of the calories in a donut are actually not carbohydrate, they're fat. And the same is true for a thing like a piece of cake, and even crackers have tons of added oil. So these classic carbohydrate foods are not what we're talking about. We're talking about whole foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and we'll get into the nuts and seeds. Yeah, because fat. What about fat?
What about the fat?
The brain's made of fat. Don't we need fat for the brain? And yeah, we do need fat for the brain, but we don't need to gobble down the fat for the brain of our health. And
the health of our brain.
Maybe I need more fat. I'm not speaking clearly.
I don't think you do.
But really, the fat that I want to focus on in terms of brain health is DHA and EPA, which are our essential omega fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids. And there's a lot of great research showing that higher blood levels of DHA correspond with higher levels of DHA in the brain, which correspond with lower levels of dementia and Alzheimer's. And also they're showing that when people with Alzheimer's supplement with DHA and EPA fatty acids, their symptoms do lessen and their brain matter actually increases. Because brain shrinkage, loss of brain matter is just a natural byproduct of aging, but also potentially correlated with poor cognition.
Yeah.
So the question is, how much DHA and EPA do we need to really preserve our brain health, especially in older age? And there are studies showing, that a certain amount of DHA in the blood is good for maintaining more brain matter and more cognition at older ages. But I know that also a big source of DHA for people is fish. And so some people are concerned, for those who aren't eating fish, maybe they're not getting enough DHA and EPA, and that's where supplementation comes in. What we think is, well, do you want to talk a bit more about your perspective of?
Well, I think I want to back up just a little bit, because we're talking about carbohydrates as providing the fuel for the brain, for the fuel for the neurons, if you will, the brain cells. But there are other aspects of your neurons that are comprised of fat, and these are it's called the myelin sheath of the neurons that surround and insulate these neurons so that they can transmit the neuronal activity and transmit these signals throughout your body. So it's important to have fat in around your neurons as that insulation. Otherwise, your brain would literally melt. Your brain would be transmitting so much energy, producing so much heat that your neurons and your brain would melt, which is an interesting thing to consider. So fat is that insulating component around your brain, and DHA and EPA being the optimal fats to provide that insulated source. And yeah, what was your question?
Well, yeah, I guess I'll also take a step back. Common sources of DHA and EPA are fish and nuts and seeds. Mainly chia seeds and flax seeds and hemp seeds are higher in the omega-3 fatty acids.
My 3 favorite seeds.
Ben's 3 favorite seeds.
Yeah.
So when it comes to vegan sources of omega-3 fatty acids in supplement form, there's algae oil as well. And I guess the question is, I think the real practical question for our listeners out there is how much DHA and EPA should they be taking?
If any.
If any. And there are a lot of nutrition experts out there that do recommend a minimum of supplementing with 250 milligrams of omega-3 oils a day. And there's also, for different types of neurological issues, there's even higher levels that are recommended. Yeah. But for an average healthy person, I think the best practice would probably be to measure the levels in the blood and see how they are.
That's what I was going to say. We like to take away the guesswork and just get these omega-3 levels measured in your blood. And what's most important is the ratios between omega-3s and omega-6s. So depending on your individual diet, depending on your individual biochemistry, everyone's going to be different. Their ratios are going to be different, and therefore their optimal supplement dose is going to be different, or how much chia seeds and flax seeds and hemp seeds they're going to be eating a day is going to be different. So it's a complex little niche of nutritional biochemistry, and specifically related to your brain health. And that being said, it's important to know that fats do play a significant role in optimizing your brain health, specifically, like I said, for that insulating component. A lot of people, think that the fat is being metabolized as fuel for the brain and this whole ketosis thing, but that's not actually happening unless, of course, you're in ketosis. which is a whole nother conversation. Some people are saying that ketosis supports optimal cognition. We're thinking more clearly and optimizing, and we're, our cognition is more optimized when we're running on ketones. But there's not been any scientific data that supports that claim. In fact, the opposite appears to be true. When we're fueling our body with, whole food carbohydrate sources, that's typically when people experience optimal cognition and clearest thinking.
Mm-hmm. And as we said before, when we look at some of the risk factors of stroke and Alzheimer's, high cholesterol is one of those, really big risk factors. And eating a diet that's high in lots of fats and typically increases the cholesterol in the blood.
Yes.
So
should we get into brain foods?
Yeah, let's talk about some specific brain foods.
So if you've been with us this far, then you'll know that, like we said in the beginning, there's not one way of eating just for your brain. But that being said, there are some powerful brain foods that support all of the things that we've been talking about, specifically relating to the vascular health and inflammation and these kind of things.
Yeah.
Detoxification, which is another big thing that we haven't gotten into yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to start talking about cruciferous vegetables, because if you actually take a cauliflower and cut it in half, it looks just like the cross-section of a brain.
Yeah.
Fascinating enough.
Who would have thunk?
But so all cruciferous vegetables, that's broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, cabbage, the list goes on. They all contain sulforaphane, which there's been some really cool research done on this compound.
It's a powerful molecule.
Yeah. And so it's shown that in people with autism, they actually get a reduction in their symptoms when they get a fever. And they discovered that the reason why this is so is because when you have a fever, you naturally increase heat shock proteins, which help promote they help promote transmission in the synapses of your brain. And so that helps reduce the symptoms. But what also naturally increases heat shock protein in the brain are these sulforaphanes that are contained in broccoli and cauliflower. So
that's just one thing. That's
just one thing. Yeah,
that sulforaphane does. It does a number of other things related to the brain health and detoxification specifically,
such as it reduces oxidative stress in the brain, it reduces inflammation in the brain, and it also increases mitochondrial function in the brain. These are all really important for maintaining good cognition.
Yeah. So I'll jump to berries, and berries are, someone pointed out, I asked the question to the Instagram audience on my channel, questions about brain health, and someone wanted to know the specifics around berries. And the fact of the matter is that, yes, berries are one of the best brain foods for a number of reasons. So I want to first talk about the phytonutrient content in berries, which is essentially the pigment, the colorful aspect of all of our favorite berries. This colorful pigment is the antioxidant source in all of the berries, and that antioxidant source really protects the blood vessels in the brain, like we were talking about before, so that they maintain their resiliency, that they're able to carry and shuttle blood into the nooks and crannies of your whole brain. And berries are just above and beyond the most powerful sources of antioxidants to maintain that vascular integrity inside the brain. And following up on that is greens. Greens are another superfood, of course. And by greens we mean, of course, the spinach, arugula, kale, lettuces, and these kind of things. And greens are brain food.
Then the yellows, just kidding, turmeric, super yellow. populations that eat a lot of turmeric have been studied to have been found to have lower rates of Alzheimer's, and they were thinking, oh, maybe that's just because those populations also have a diet that's lower in animal protein and fat. But it's also shown that when people who have Alzheimer's supplement with turmeric, they get improvement in their symptoms.
So a lot of these other foods are kind of spanning the gray area between foods and herbs, because a lot of foods are culinary, or a lot of herbs are culinary herbs, and we put them in our food. And another one being rosemary. And rosemary is, just smelling rosemary can actually improve cognition. Mm-hmm. Rosemary essential oil is a great one, and cooking with rosemary can really, bring energy and life into your brain. Mm-hmm. And it's just a really special, amazing food herb.
Yeah. And so we also spoke earlier about the sources of omega-3 fatty acids, and we actually have a question about fish. So the question is, salmon is the fish I associate with omega-3s, but when it comes from farmed sources, does it lose the nutrients?
Yes. Yes. Farm salmon is definitely not the best salmon to get. Farm salmon is best when it comes to, a lot of people think that farm salmon should be good because it's, you're protecting the oceans and you're not overfishing the oceans, and, cultivating these salmons and eating the cultivated salmon should be best. But the cultivated salmon in these farmed conditions are completely unnatural. So they actually don't have the optimal sources of omega-3s as they would naturally have in their natural environment. In addition to that, they accumulate tons of toxins that, are runoff from, farms and other industries and that sort of thing. And in these farmed environments, which are a very unnatural environment, these toxins bioaccumulate. So the little fish get eaten by the bigger fish, and the bigger fish get eaten by the bigger fish, and then we eat the bigger fish. And so that we end up being at the top of the food chain. So all of these toxicants, like heavy metals and pesticides and things that we definitely don't want in our bodies and are toxic to our brains, these kind of things bioaccumulate in that sort of way, and we bear the brunt of that bioaccumulation when we eat farmed fish. So farmed fish should definitely be avoided. Thanks for pointing that out. Mm-hmm. And
then we have another question too about taking a small amount of DHA in algae form.
Yeah.
For breastfeeding.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Yeah. Consult with your midwife or doctor. That would obviously be smart.
Yeah.
All right, should we finish up our talk?
Yeah, so we also just wanted to speak a little bit to some of the toxins found in food. Like we've already spoken a little bit.
Yeah, that kind of was a good segue from the farmed fish into the toxins, because farmed fish are a great source of toxins. Mm-hmm. Great in not a good way.
Yeah, but there's some other food sources you wouldn't think would have so many toxins in them. One of which is processed cheese, which they actually add aluminum to. And aluminum in the brain is related to neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. So that's something to think about, to consider when you're buying cheese. Yeah. Also, high levels of iron accumulation for those who have levels of iron that are too high. That can also lead to a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's. Glycotoxins found in chicken. Mercury found in fish, a lot, mainly fish, especially the bigger fishes like tuna. It's important that women who are pregnant and also breastfeeding stay away from big fishes that contain those higher levels of heavy metals. And then arsenic, it's actually fed to chickens. It's in their feed, and arsenic is also linked to a lot of neurological issues.
A lot of things.
So I feel like that's a short list.
That's a very short list, and obviously we took like 90 seconds to go over that short list, and it's a really, really big, important topic, and we have addressed it slightly in prior podcast episodes, and we will address it more in the future because being aware of toxins is really an important thing in our world today. And that leads us to finish up on the topic of exercise, which is a powerful medicine when it comes to brain health for such a number of reasons. Physical exercise obviously, releases endorphins and all these hormones in the brain that are associated with, positive outlook and mood and these sort of things. And as you've become aware, we're not talking about mental health, even though we think about mental health associated with the brain. We're focusing more on physical health related to the brain. But exercise is also super duper powerful for physical health for a number of reasons related to supporting the body in managing blood sugar and reducing insulin resistance and all of these kind of things, and also promoting the oxygenation of that area of the body. As we're circulating blood, where the blood goes, energy flows, and where energy flows, we have oxygenation and nutrients and all these kind of things.
And so aerobic exercise has been shown to actually increase the size of the hippocampus, which is the area in the brain that's responsible for memory and learning. So that's a fun fact.
Yeah.
Exercise is also linked with a larger prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe, which is also really important for
who doesn't want a larger
cognition.
Prefrontal cortex?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. The other factors that are, directly impacting brain health are just that it improves insulin, it reduces insulin
like I already said.
Okay.
Like I already said. So, we've been going for about 27 minutes now. Thanks for tuning in thus far. There's obviously always more to talk about with regard to brain health and brain optimization. There's herbs. There's, should we go over the herbs?
Bacopa, centella, ginkgo, rosemary, holy basil. These are all great herbs that improve memory and cognition.
Once again, Bacopa, centella, which is related to vascular integrity of the brain vascular system. Ginkgo biloba, and that's the classic brain herb. Rosemary, as we mentioned before. Holy basil, which is very much supports all aspects of the body. And then there's the nervine herbs, which calm down the nervous system, which are really powerful for supporting the brain and relaxing, because brain health is not all about just like firing synapses and thinking and doing all these tasks. Brain health is also about how we can turn off our brains, shut down the nervous system a little bit so we can allow the body to heal. So that's where nervine herbs come in, and nervine herbs are those herbs that do that to the nervous system. So passion flower, a powerful nervine.
Chamomile, we're all familiar with.
Chamomile. Skullcap.
Valerian.
And these are also herbs that generally support people in falling asleep. All right, so that's it for Brain Week. Hope you've learned a lot and are able to implement some of these things into your daily life, some of these foods, some of these herbs, some of these understandings.
As always, we're just kind of scratching the surface on this huge topic of brain health. But hopefully this was a great introduction for you.
And if you do have any questions or want to dive deeper into understanding how to support and optimize your brain, your cognition, and your overall health and physiologic functioning, we are here for you. Just head over to alter.health. All right, peace and love, and until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.